meeting was called pursuant to the public meetings law. The meeting of September the 24th, 2018 was sent to the central records, Rowan County Times, and Courier Post, posted on the bulletin board in Town Hall, has remained continuously posted on required places under the statute. In addition, a copy of this notice and has been available to the public and is on file in the office of the municipal clerk. Roll call, Ms. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Franzen.
Here.
Mr. Lee.
Here.
Mr. Gates.
Here.
Mayor Barton.
Present. Thank you, Ms. Ron. At some point tonight, we had expected our county clerk, Tim Tyler, to be here. He was going to present the township with a POW MIA flag. For those that you may remember, last Friday, which is the third Friday in September, is an unofficial holiday, but it's POW MIA Day. And it's in recognition of 1,594 Americans who are not buried here in America with their loved ones. 40 of those folks are from the state of New Jersey. For those that you are a member of civic organizations, I'm a member of an Elks. And when you go to the Elks Club, they have a glass window and there's a table. And there's hats and place settings for six. And you say, why six? There's 5 branches of the military, and there's a seat for civilians. So there's also civilians that have been missing in action and with POWs. So when Mr. Tyler gets here, if he should get here tonight, we'll slide him into the agenda. I also want to announce that we added to the agenda repair of a resolution to repair our salt dome, which is out here, which needs to be repaired before the winter. So other than that, we're going to take public comments on agenda items only. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Mayor Barton, and good evening, everyone. I have questions on 3 items. First is item 6, the bond ordinance 2018-6. When you discussed this, or before, I'd like to know how these roads were selected. None are included on the 2018 projects in the 2017 road report that you adopted. Only 2 of them are included in 2019 projects. I'm not saying that these roads don't need repair, or that they do need repair, but I want to bring your attention to the promise that was made in 2017 when you identified Carranza Road as being in desperate condition, that it would be repaired. And now that previously unidentified roads are being bonded for, it makes me question your commitment to the repair of Carranza. So one of the other questions is, are you still committed to repairing Carranza? And related to that, if this grant application for Carranza Road in Old Business isn't fully funded by NJDOT, will monies from this bond be used to complete Carranza Road from Tuckerton to Moores Meadow, which was the primary section that needed repair? Also regarding the bond ordinance, I noticed that speed bumps on Lee Drive are included. They weren't mentioned in the road report that Mr. Guzzi prepared, nor was this improvement discussed by the committee, yet it's now in the bond ordinance. I'd like to know when was that decision to place these speed bumps made? Regarding item 7, resolution 2018-101, that resolution calls for a grant application to DOT for repaving Oak Shade Road. The road report, and it's the past, present, future road proposal for Tabernacle Township that I've been referring to. That road report notes that DOT has already denied the Oak Shade Road application twice, and it recommends that priority be switched from Carranza and Powell, scratch that, my mistake, be switched from Oak Shade and Powell to Carranza. And since that report, the road report was adopted, I would think that that's what we would be following and being implemented. I'd like to know how this resolution impacts that commitment towards Carranza. Lastly, regarding the old business, the Carranza Road application, which is item 9, it's my understanding from Mr. Guzzi that the section from Tuckerton to Moores Meadow Road is roughly $642,000, and the cost from Moores Meadow Road to the railroad is roughly $2 million. I'd like to know if these are the total costs, or if they're being split between Chemung and Tabernacle. And if they are, what's the split? And if you could address all of those things as you go through your agenda, I would appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Anyone else on Mr. Hall? Jim?
Jim Jones, 16 Wilmington Way, Tabernacle. Regarding the resolutions, 102 and 103, I'm curious as to why the bond for Seneca Woods is being lowered and how much. And I'm also curious about 103 and that is the sewage treatment that they're talking about requesting going to lead to more commercial activity in that area. Just a few questions I have.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Anyone else on public items? Mr. Brooks?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Fran Brooks, Morris Meadow Road. Just a couple of things. One is a bill item. It's at least on my draft version, page number 3, and it belongs to the Tabernacle DOE. There's an appraisal fee for a community center. What community center are we talking about? What building are we talking about that you're paying an appraisal for?
Is the one walking trail? Yes.
I'm sorry?
It's the old squad building on Hawkins Road.
It's the old squad building on Hawkins Road, and why, or if that falls under the DOE, wasn't that already appraised when the township took it over? And why is it under the BOE?
We're paying them back. They hired the appraiser.
The BOE hired the appraiser to do, when was that appraisal done?
As Mayor, if I may interject for a moment, this is really kind of pushing the envelope here, but as the representative of the liaison committee, the municipality and Tabernacle Board of Ed both collectively worked with an appraiser to have two buildings done. One that is titled to the municipality, one that's titled to the Board of Ed. And the idea was to, since both of us had an appraisal we wanted done, we both collectively went together on the appraisal to lower the cost to the taxpayers as a whole.
For the Hawkins Road building? That was the appraisal that was done years ago?
No, there was an appraisal that was done within the last month and a half.
When was that discussed that you were doing an appraisal of the Hawkins Road property? Because you already had an appraisal and that property transferred from the TRS from the emergency squad to the township.
That's an interesting question, but I've already answered your question as much as I'm going to at this point. Thanks.
Well, I don't understand. I mean, really, we're the ones who are paying for it, so you really should have...
Yeah, you asked a question on the bill list, I told you what it was. That's the end of it.
Okay, so you went to Cabsy's on an appraisal of that building, okay, of the Hawkins Road TRS building. Wow.
That's not what I said, but that's fine.
But I don't know what the background to that is. I mean, what is the background? Why are you even doing an appraisal of that building already? Surely, Mayor, you
For
could...
the possibility of selling it, Mrs. Brooks.
Selling, so why would the BOE be involved in selling a building that we have control
So,
of?
see if I can make this clear.
Sure, please,
We're
please
needed to do an
edify.
appraisal of the building. We needed to do an appraisal of the building. We put one appraisal, hired one appraisal to do both buildings. We're reimbursing them for the cost of the building that their appraiser did for us.
So
Other than
if-
us each get an appraiser, we hired one appraiser to do two buildings, one building for them, one building for us. We're reimbursing them for the amount of cost to appraise the building that we asked them to do.
Okay, and the other was for this building over here?
I suspect.
You suspect?
I don't know. I don't know what the board, I wasn't interested in what the board was appraising. I was only interested in what we wanted to appraise.
Okay, thank you. What about Resolution 2018-99? This has to do with monies allocated for park and street improvements. what money is being spent, what is the money being spent on? And is there a contribution coming from the county? Is some part of monies that are being spent on the park come from the county, and what is our portion of that park grant? What is the contribution? Because the resolution, I think it was $103,000, and it wasn't clear that must be, is that money coming, can you clarify if that money's coming from the county, and what is our share or our contribution or a match
We'll clarify when we
for
get to
that?
that.
That would be great. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else for the public, for public comments on agenda items? Okay.
Mayor, I
Yes.
sense that the changing the agenda needs to be added so that the public is clear.
Yeah, I mentioned this at the beginning of the meeting that we're going to add a resolution 2018-105, authorize the advertising for bids for the roof and structure repairs for Tabernacle Township salt dome facility. So we will include that in there. And then also, okay, at this time, I see our county. I'm sorry. Yeah, I see. I see our county clerk here. Tim, we did mention that you were coming.
Yes.
You were going to be a little bit late, and
I apologize.
Gave you a presentation for everyone.
Absolutely.
That doesn't know him. This is our county clerk,
Yes.
Tim Tyler. Tim, welcome. Now, we've already talked to the about the fact that Friday was MIA, POW MIA Day, and so
So,
the floor is yours.
what I'm going to present here today, the genesis of it started in 1993. 1993, a Vietnam veteran went to the War Memorial in Washington, D.C., and at that time there was no flag that they could fly there, that he could leave there. Since then, he started designing his flag, and it worked its way through the system, culminating in 2017 on August 7th. Then Governor Chris Christie signed into legislation recognizing a proper KIA flag to be flown at the principal building of the state, the county, and the municipality. Unfortunately, like some things that happened to the state, the information wasn't disseminated that well. Go figure. So Burlington County didn't know that this law had passed. Part of the clerks interact a lot with the veterans through DD 214s, through hopefully we never have to do one, but both our parent IDs. And this ultimately made its way across my desk. So as an initiative on August 7th of 2018, Burlington County hoisted our KIA flag. Since then, I purchased flags for every municipality in the county, and I've been hand delivering them to every governing body. I didn't think it was appropriate to mail. I thought it would be more worthy of coming making the trip all over. So on behalf of myself, the clerk's office, I'd like to present you, Mr. Mayor, governing body, the Tabernacle Township's KIA flag. Thank you very much. My
Put
pleasure.
this in the hands of administrative, and I'm sure we'll find an appropriate place on the flagpole for it.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you again for allowing me to get on the agenda so quick. I apologize for the delay. The link was a little further away than I actually thought it was. And as always, if my office or myself can do anything to help you guys out, please just feel free to give my office a call. Give me a call. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Okay, approval of bills?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Francis?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Before we do the approval of minutes, I'm going to ask that we table executive session August 27, 2018. To give some time to talk to Peter and our clerk about this particular set of minutes. So I'd like to have approval for the regular meeting minutes for August 27, 2018.
So moved. Second.
A roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes, up till 9 o'clock.
Thank you. Mr. Francis?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Okay, ordinances on first reading. Ordinance 2018-5, an ordinance amending Chapter 16 land subdivision and Chapter 17 zoning of the Code of the Township of Tabernacle, County of Burlington, and State of New Jersey. Public hearing for this will be October 22nd, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. motion to introduce? Second?
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franson?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Are we going to save discussion on this for the second reading?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Mr. Yates? Mayor Barton?
Yes. Okay, first reading ordinance 2018-6, bond ordinance authorizing the completion of various capital improvements and the acquisition of various capital equipment in and for Tabernacle Township, appropriating the sum of $1,365,000, authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds or bond anticipation notes to the Tabernacle Township in the aggregate principal amount of up to $1,296,750, making certain determinations and covenants and authorizing certain related actions in connection with the foregoing. A public hearing on this will also be on October 22nd, 2018 at 7:30 p.m. The motion?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second it, but I've got a lot of questions, and there's a couple of things I'd like to get resolved before the public hearing.
Okay.
So I'll second it.
We have a motion, a second, and we'll open it for discussion with the committee.
I'd like to get some details about the, specifically about the decision we're making regarding the installation of speed bumps on the drive. We had some discussion in our August meeting regarding, actually Mr. Lishman had mentioned about purchasing a speed limiter sign or a speed limit indicator sign, and now I'm reading about speed bumps on Lee Drive and bonding $1.8 million for. Also like some understanding about the acquisition for Public Works. I'm sorry, was it?
There was some discussion between the engineer and my concern.
Okay, if I can finish what I was saying first, and then
Okay.
any other discussion you want to have, that's fine with me. I'd also like to get some details regarding the purchase for the spray equipment, dump body with plow. I'd like to understand how that fits in the overall plan that we had when we met with Mrs. Brown and I met with Mr. Kramer last summer, and also how it affects our, what we did in terms of the liquidation of the equipment a few weeks ago, and also some details regarding the utility vehicle for the fire department. So if we can get answers to those questions, I'll be happy to talk to anyone that wants to submit that information to the committee prior to the public hearing. That'd be great. That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Doug, you want to respond?
Mayor, I'd be happy to explain.
Thank you.
I don't want it all right now. We can talk about it before the meeting, but I'd like to at least have something other than me having a decision to write down everything you tell me.
Not a problem.
So Doug, the speed bumps, we'll talk about the speed bumps.
Speed bumps were supposed to go in as traffic calming devices. I'll have to get that correct with the bond council. That was one of the examples that we're giving. It was added in there, so if we needed to do that, we could.
Okay, do we have the sign in there, the speed sign?
We'll probably buy that, depending on what the price is, we'll probably buy that at a current fund if that's what we're doing. If we're doing mobile, yes, we would.
And you're just wondering,
Right now, we were talking about one portable one.
right.
I will answer questions about how we came to the determination of roads if you want that.
Yeah, why don't you do that?
Okay. Dan and I took the 2018 roadway evaluation system and went to the listing by rating. Grange Road has the lowest rating at 58. Holly Park Drive is 64. Kramer Road is 65. Palace Road, which we are going out to bid to pave this year, is a 66. Sylvain Court is a 66. And Hawkins Road from 206 to Carranza is a 69. It's one of a group of many 69s. The only one we skipped was Mark Lane, which is a 67. So we worked from the bottom of the evaluation, and that's how we came up with the determinations of the roads. So So the only road we skipped that had a lower rating of any of the ones was Mark Lane, and it serviced 3 houses, and we evaluated that. Thought we could let that go for another year or so. Worked off that evaluation point. We felt Grants Road was being covered by the request for the grant. We also, when we looked at these combination of roads, they fit into the bond money that was available that we agreed, that was passed in the bond, or the budget this year.
Okay, and Doug, do we have the flexibility if Grand Road was not funded by DOT to, we have the flexibility to move some of those funds and move those roads around, right?
Yes, we named those roads particularly. We can add other roads as needed into there. It calls for various township roads, including but not limited to, so that would cover us if we need it.
Okay, thank you.
The equipment, the truck is a replacement for truck 8. We had originally anticipated that being a next year project and had a pickup and a utility truck on this year. We've in March snowstorms, we had some tree branches come up underneath and rip the exhaust system off, which was the catalytic converter that was installed by the state. It destroyed that. We attempted to reinstall it earlier in the year, and there was not enough left of it to reinstall, so we installed a standard exhaust system back on it. This June, the state came around to make inspections. We attempted to have it reinstalled for a second time. Went with the company that did a lot of the installations. They had nothing available. The manufacturer that our system is, the dealer is no longer in business, and we have been in conversation with the DEP and have talked to them about using it in a limited role and only for snow removal in the winter and replacing it a year earlier. So we took the exact same dollar amount we had for those 2 items and put it together for a replacement truck for that.
Okay. Any other questions from the committee? Okay, we'll have the public hearing on October 22nd. Okay, resolutions. I'm sorry, we got the motion second, all right, roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franson?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
I just want to emphasize, I'd like to have a summary about my request in the initial motion before the meeting. I'll vote yes as well.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Okay. Resolution 2018-98, authorizing cancellation of certain property taxes pursuant to a 100% total disabled veteran exception.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franson?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes, and without name, I'd like to thank this veteran for his service. Resolution 2018-99, approval of items of revenue appropriation, NJSA 40A:4-87, municipal park development grant.
So moved.
Second.
Before we vote on this, this is the, we'll talk about what you're going to use this grant for.
This is the $103,000 that was approved by the county as a recreation grant. We're bringing it into our budget now so we can spend it. It is what you approved last month. That is the continuation of the remainder of the dugout covers at Patty Boger and a gazebo type structure over top of the picnic tables at the playground at Patty Boger and one at Christmas Mill.
Okay, thank you.
Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Gordon?
Yes. Resolution 2018-100, approval of items of revenue appropriation in JSA 40A:4-87, Clean Communities Grant.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Gordon?
Yes. Resolution 2018-101, approval to submit a grant application, execute a grant contract with the NJDOT for the Oak Shade Road repaving project. Have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay, roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Gordon?
Yes, resolution 2018-102, approval of performance bond guarantee reduction for Seneca Woods Phase 1. A motion?
I'll make it.
Second?
Second.
Doug, you and Steve are both sit on the development board, just want to talk about, I suspect this came from them.
This is, comes from Dan's office. Go ahead.
So as you're aware, performance bonds are required for major development when they're doing work with the municipality, in this case the Seneca Woods subdivision. They posted a performance bond for the entire amount of phase 1 of the construction. As they complete items of construction, they're entitled to periodically ask for a reduction in the bond amount. This does not mean that they're completely off the hook. There'll still be a maintenance bond under those items once all the items are complete, but they have completed a good portion of the work, mainly in the clearing and the prepping for stormwater and the roadway work. So this is a reduction in the bond amount that they're required to have at the township. It still equals in excess of the amount of work they have left to complete. And again, this doesn't accept the work in any way. This just reduces their bond amount. Everything will be covered under the maintenance bond when they're complete.
Thank you, Dan. Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franzen?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
No.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Gordon?
Yes, resolution 2018-103, approval to authorize the mayor to sign a statement of consent for submission of the NJDOT treatment works approval application for Yates Plaza, 1572 and 1576 Route 76. Is that?
Route 206.
Route 206 for a septic system project. Motion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call?
Yes, Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Can we get, excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt, roll call. Can we get a little bit of dialogue about how we got here?
Sure.
Other than the letter I got in my packet.
If you'd like, Mayor, whenever a septic system project is being undertaken that's in excess of 2,000 gallons a day capacity, it's no longer handled by the county health department. It goes up to the state, New Jersey, the NJDEP for review and approval. As part of that process, the application has to be sort of acknowledged by the municipality. The DEP requires that there's a resolution and that the governing body or somebody in the governing body authorizes, signs the application. Basically, it's called a statement of consent. All it means is the township is aware of the application and has reviewed the application of the plans to make sure that they conform to all local ordinances. We received a copy of the plans, we did review them, there's nothing contrary to any of the ordinances in the township, so we made the recommendation that the governing body go ahead and consent to the application. It's not an approval of any sort, it just allows the applicant, in this case Yates Plaza, to go ahead and submit their application to the DEP to renovate basically their existing septic system.
The township has no authority in regard to that regulation in any event. It's
No,
really just
that's right.
an indication that the township is aware, and again, that the local engineers reviewed the plan.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay. Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franson?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes, resolution 2018-104 authorizing township administrator to prepare specifications, solicit bids for the 2018 snow removal service.
So, Mayor, I think the intent of that resolution is to allow the mayor or the administrator to go out to bid for that. Because we prepared the specifications that they were forwarded last week, right?
Yep.
So we're asking you to adopt them and to authorize the bidding process based upon your adoption of those specs, that bid package.
Okay, so the township administrator has prepared the specifications and he put together a bid for 2018 snow removal service. This resolution would allow him to go out and bid.
Right, and the township governing body has to adopt by resolution the bid package, the form, and that's what you had, and that's what we're asking you to do.
Okay. Do you have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
So do we have any changes from a year ago?
No, the difference is we did it as a quote last year because we expected the dollar amount to be below 17.5. It wasn't, so under the advice of the acting CFO, we're going to a bid this year.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other discussion? Okay, roll call.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franson?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes, resolution 2018-105 authorizing advertising of bids for roof repairs for the Tabernacle Township salt dome facility.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franson?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But yes, I'll say yes for him too.
Mr. Lee?
I'm assuming we need the repairs. I mean, this is still on the agenda, but I have no idea what we're doing, but yeah, I guess we'll, sure, yes.
Well, we can't have water leaking on the salt.
No, I get that. I just
That
be nice
doesn't
to know
work.
what the heck's going on before I get to the meeting, that's all.
Mr. Yates? Thank you. And Mayor Barton?
Yes. Okay, a motion for a parade permit for Fine Barons 500, which is the Adventure Eco Tour. Sponsored organization for Fine Barons Adventure Camp LLC. The event date is October 26, 27, 28, 2018. A motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Just on everything, insurance, you have everything, everything's ready to go, right?
Everything is just good to go.
Good, okay, roll call.
Thank you, Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franson?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes, parade permit, Farm to Fork Farmville Garden State, non-competitive cycling event sponsoring organization, Renegade Sports LLC, event date October 14, 2018. A motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franson?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Barton?
Yes. Okay, under old business, we need a motion to authorize the township engineer to submit an NJDOT application for Cransville Road repaving to the end of existing paving on Cransville Road as a joint project with Shamon County pursuant to resolution 2018-82. Motion.
I'll make the motion. I just have a comment too. Is that right?
Second.
We got a chance to do that. Dan, thanks for reaching out to Washington Township regarding the bond hit for that. Appreciate that.
Did we get a second?
We did.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I actually, I had a comment too when I
Okay,
said
thank you.
it, but I will second it then, since Stephen said I did.
Did a comment, Jeff?
Yeah, I actually thought we were going to go ahead and submit this and if we needed to amend it, we were going to amend it. That's where I thought we left it, that, because I thought you said we can go ahead and submit it, and then if we needed to add to it, we could, and we were in the meantime going to reach out. Am I mistaken?
That's not the way I understood it, Ms. Brown. And I think that once you submit the application, I think it's best not to go in and amend it, especially with the amount of amendment that would be with the Washington Township end of the project, so.
But I don't believe that was the conversation we had.
I thought it was. Maybe
No,
I
I'm just saying, because the question was, could you amend it after submission, was our comment at the meeting, and you said yes. And I thought the direction was for you, because I thought this was, we were doing this 2 months ago. So it was my understanding that you were going to still reach out, like you did. But it was my understanding you were going to go ahead so we could get the ball rolling, get a place in line, and then still reach out and see if there's other municipalities. Is that your understanding?
I did.
Okay, Mr. Lee thought the same thing, so at least I'm not the only one that thought that, so I feel better.
And I apologize, that was not my understanding. It is ready to go, the application, so we will submit it. But I was under the impression we were contacting Washington Township to see if they wanted to participate prior to submitting the application.
Okay, any other discussion? Roll call?
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Franklin?
Yes.
Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Mr. Yates?
Yes.
Mayor Parton?
Yes. Okay, also under old business, we have a discussion of the tabled ordinance from 8/27/2018, which is the second reading ordinance of 2018-3, an ordinance repealing and replacing Article 8 of the Township Code entitled Public Functions and Similar Uses of Public Places. So,
Mayor, I can facilitate a discussion on that.
that would be great. Thank you.
There was a lot of discussion regarding the original draft, and it did not meet some of the expectations of the committee with respect to its breadth and its applicability. So I did get some very helpful direction from Mr. Lee, who suggested that we pare it back quite a bit. I think that was also based on interaction with Arch as far as how this should be applied and what information should be supplied and what the form of the permit should be and whether or not there should be a fee. So after those discussions with Mr. Lee, he was also helpful and provided me additional information. And so the original ordinance as I proposed it did require a permit when in fact the permit was applicable to the planned event. And if you'll permit me, I'll find that definition that I just had in front of me. And so it was originally defined as a special event to include a number of different items, including some issues whereby the committee and Mr. Lee felt that it was a little bit of an overreach. So I suggest that we pare back the definitions and its applicability significantly and define a special event as any protest, service, fair, carnival, festival, show, exhibition, celebration, assembly, pageant, or other similar public event to be conducted within or partly within the Township of Tabernacle where attendance by participants, spectators, and/or patrons is expected to be greater than, and then I thought it was an excellent idea to say the occupancy rating of the occupied structure or structures at the site where the event is to be conducted. So the applicability would be only those events where it is expected reasonably by the owner of the property or the person conducting the event that the response or the number of individuals present would exceed the occupancy rating for the building. And where the event or part of the event is to be held on public ground or public park or public right-of-way or private ground where the public is invited and or the event is advertised. So otherwise the same definition, and then also include those items that really come from your parade permit and make it applicable to a walkathon, a march, parade, automobile, road rally, and all of the other items that are previously included in your ordinance with respect to a parade permit. And then eliminate the exceptions essentially and pare that down significantly such that the permit would only apply or be exempt. Funeral processions would be exempt, wedding processions and labor disputes or processions arriving at a labor disputes would be exempted, and none of the other exemptions with respect to educational events or educational institutions or other even public or public entity events sponsored by the fire department or the EMS would not be applicable, but to the extent that there was any possibility that the event would draw a number of people to exceed the occupancy rating for the building, that a permit would be required. And then we could simply say that when your event is expected to meet that definition, that you have to fill out the special event permit that was prepared by Mr. Sunbury. And then simply say after that, that once this information is received and reviewed by your Office of Emergency Management, that the Office of Emergency Management could require further information, further plans in their sole discretion. And of course understand that I think Mr. Sunbury is going to be working from the information that's listed as required in the plan, but again, this would not be necessarily required. He would then be able to say what he wanted, what he didn't need, whether it was enough information, but he would be working from the list of material that's included in Section D. Even though it wouldn't be referenced, they would just have to file the application. He would have the ability then to go back to them and demand additional information. And I was also provided with another document that might be helpful in identifying the issues that would be involved in pre-planning, as they are part of the NFPA, or the National Fire Protection Association regulations. And then that has a very comprehensive list of items that would be considered in the pre-planning stage by your Office of Emergency Management, including access, ingress, evacuation, and a whole list, pyrotechnics, food operations, a whole list of potential topics and issues to be discussed. That way, Mr. Sunbury would have the authority and the luxury of deciding on an event-by-event basis what exactly was going to be required of the applicant, and not sort of be overkill with somebody who would otherwise not have to provide significant information, or not, their event might not raise so much concern, and then just have no permit fee associated with that ordinance. So if the committee wants me to pare it down to a sort of a bare bones approach, leaving the authority to deal with what's necessary and what's not necessary, again, within the parameters of the list that we know we're working from, then Mr. Sunbury and your Office of Emergency Management, in conjunction with Mr. Liston, can decide what information they want or more, or what precautions they want to take or not, and not sort of build that into the process whereby applicants that would be really overburdened in light of the specifics on their particular event. So if that's the direction that you want me to take, we would have to re-advertise it because it's such a big difference. But we could have that easily in place in a draft to the committee for the next meeting. With that, I'd ask Mr. Lee if he had any other comments or concerns at this point. Have I expressed essentially what your vision of going forward on this is?
I think so. Just I wanted to clarify that this exempts, there was a concern regarding like Christmas Eve Mass at the churches. The idea is that you're not going to have the maximum capacity exceeded, but it still does not exempt lacrosse tournaments, soccer tournaments, those types of events.
The fall festival.
Right, doesn't exempt any of those events.
Things that are going on that are analogous.
But can I ask a question though? You're saying the occupancy, well,
For building.
the fall festival, it's a big area. What's the occupancy of the outside?
Well, it indicates that, like I said in my discussions, right.
But because of the
definition, that would still require the application to be filed. So if you look at the definition in black and white, as I indicated.
Yeah, I'm not looking at it, so I have to.
You'll see that that's
I'm more
actually
visual.
included. So if it's to be housed inside the buildings, then, and if it's expected that it might exceed the occupancy of the building, they'd be required to file this simple, what is it, 2-page application, and they may not be asked for any additional information depending upon your gauging of what's necessary and what's not necessary. Is that right, Mr. Sunbury, Mr. Liston?
We have not reviewed this.
No, there's nothing to review, I'm just asking.
Well, no, you're going to introduce an ordinance on first reading. We haven't reviewed it.
We've already introduced the ordinance on first reading, and this is.
I've got to speak to this as a public safety director and experience in government for 40-some years. we've taken a relatively simple process, for a small town, and we have, to use the term that they use in the U.S. Senate, we've turned it into the sausage. This wasn't here. This was here when I came on the job, and there was some input we had. I think we've taken, and I've been to a lot of these different ordinances on public events. I think that taking a step back, looking at some, we took, I guess, Shamon's ordinance, or whoever's ordinance it was, and we've modified that. I think that from a homework standpoint, if we could go and do some further research and look at what other people have done statewide and region-wide to simplify the process. The other thing, the question we have, not seeing this ordinance, you have to reintroduce this ordinance, correct, Mr. Lund? All right, we haven't seen the first reading, so we don't know what it is.
In their way.
There's nothing to see. I'm trying to get some direction from the committee as to
Well,
what
I
that next
think-
version should look like.
I think before it gets introduced, I think that we should sit down and look at it, make sure that everything that we have discussed or what we can do, but also let us do a little bit more homework on this, because we're working off of an old ordinance that somebody else had. The other question we had is, once the application is filed, is it brought back in front of the committee for approval, or is it done administratively through okay, so we're eliminating that process for praise, and we can just administratively approve it,
Absolutely.
and it can be done through emergency management.
Yeah, the only thing that Pete's doing now is getting feedback from the committee.
Okay.
Based on the discussions you and I have already had.
Right.
And we've talked about, and then we'll have a reintroduction of the ordinance.
Of a new,
ordinance.
scaled back,
Right. that
much
you'll-
simplified.
Right.
Okay, you're going to introduce that first reading tonight?
No, sir.
No.
Okay, very good.
Thank
Thank you.
Chairman, how about we do this? We'll have Peter give us the draft with the notes that he has.
Okay,
Based
And
on this discussion
based on this
tonight?
discussion, we'll circulate it to everyone.
okay.
And if you and the OEM coordinator want to meet with us 2 weeks at a time,
That'd be great.
to discuss it and get it to where you think it's reasonable. I think we all know what the goal is here, right? We just want to know what's going on in town so that we're prepared, that God forbid that there should be an incident, so that we can respond accordingly, so that EMS, rescue, and fire has the notice and it has the resources available to handle whatever should happen. That's all. That's what we're trying to do here.
As always.
And the state police. And a lot of it has taken place informally over the years, but here we are in 2018. It's a different world we live in. And God forbid if something would have happened, we wouldn't be in a position and said, we thought this through, and we had the best plan in place, and we had the residents, the traveling public that come through Tabernacle, and anyone that visit Tabernacle, we had their safety in mind.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Liston, I heard the committee and yourself loud and clear. You wanted to scrap that initial version because it was too involved. And I understood that.
Okay, good.
And that was overly burdensome given the breadth of the events that we have and the size of our town. And I blended it with the parade permit ordinance in order to have one ordinance to address those special events and or parades, okay? It was a little overbaked, is what I heard, okay? So I did get some direction from Mr. Lee. I think he was speaking with you.
Right.
So you had said tonight that you want to do some additional research. You want to go and look at potentially other regulation. You've been involved with other ordinances. While you do that, on a parallel track, I'm going to redraft the ordinance with the direction that I've been given tonight based on the feedback that I had in my presentation as to how it should look in the future. I'll have that to you in the next few days. Okay, if then you have any changes based on your review or your further research, I'll ask that you get that back to me. If you have any questions or concerns, I'm happy to meet. And the goal would be to have a draft ordinance out there for consumption by the committee sometime next week, is what the goal is, I think, so that we're out ahead and we're not trying to whip it together for the next meeting, and we can have a meaningful adoption on first reading at the next meeting. Acceptable to everybody?
Yes. Okay, very good. So Peter, do we need to formalize this, a motion, a second to withdraw this ordinance so we can
To
start
table
over?
it.
To table it?
To table it.
Okay, so we're going to keep it with the same ordinance, you're just going to re-advertise it?
Well, we're going to give it a new ordinance number because this one will be tabled.
Okay.
And I'll give it a new ordinance number. After I get the high sign from Mr. Sunbury and Mr. Liston, I'll get it out to the committee. I'll also share it with Doug. and then I'll be open to whatever feedback you might want to give me prior to the next meeting, the goal being to adopt a much streamlined ordinance on the first reading at the next meeting.
Okay, so can we have a motion to table on second reading ordinance 2018-3?
So moved.
Second, roll call?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Thank you.
You're welcome, Peter, thank you. Okay, reports. Mr. List, your Public Safety Director's report.
One of the issues that has come up recently, and I think it's been discussed in preparing our budget for next year, we have the CERT team, the regional Pinelands CERT team, that we fund locally through Tabernacle Township. One of the things I would be requesting, either a motion or authorization of the Township Committee, that we can notify the surrounding towns that are involved in the Pinelands CERT team and request that they assist us in funding for the 2019 budget. At this point, with the regional group, we are funding the vast majority of almost everything of that.
Yeah, a lot of it reimbursed through public assistance funds.
Right, but I mean, we're initially putting dollars out, and we want a regional, if it's a regional team, it should be a regional cost. That's the bottom line. So how the council or the committee would like to proceed on that. Just an update, we had the first meeting regarding the Task Force 43 and trying to reorganize that. That went very well. The groups that came, we are looking to schedule a second meeting sometime in early October to continue the discussions on the task force. I feel initial meetings were, I thought, very informative, and I think we received a lot of information that we can move forward on that.
Mark?
Yes.
At that meeting, was every group represented?
They had a conflict with the EMS people, but we'll make sure we coordinate the next meeting and that they're present. We're working on that. Special events, we addressed that. Yeah, the next thing is I'm requesting some direction from the committee on some of the discussions or contractual discussions regarding emergency medical services. Requesting that we go into executive session so I can get some guidance on what direction they want to go with those discussions moving forward.
Yeah, we have that on the agenda.
Yeah,
Do you have anything else, Mark?
No, that's it.
Okay. Maybe just hold the committee on the Pinelands CERT team. It's reasonable that it's a regional team, that it should be funded from the surrounding towns. Everybody okay with Mark's contacting them towns? And are you going to put together a proposal with what you expect from each town?
Yeah, Mr. Summary and myself will sit down. We'll go through the numbers, see what our costs are, we'll see what our membership is, and then we can split the costs between the communities. And if Chemung has 40 members, we only have 20, then we're going to have
a percentage share.
It would be prorated by the number of people within the organization. That's the biggest thing.
Are you able to tell which costs aren't reimbursed at all? Because I think I heard Sunday that many of these costs are reimbursed, I guess by the federal government when you apply for
Public assistance grants. We'll have to do a budgetary analysis, because it comes down to other things like how much fuel we use for CERT 43 and things like that. So we need to gather information to better target those costs and see how much it's actually costing us.
You bring up a good point, Rick, because, we've had some sizable reimbursements, and if that's the case, then they have to be shared with surrounding towns.
We'll make sure that we extract the proper data and that we split it up between the towns. And if it's reimbursable, then it's not dollars it's reimbursable from the federal government, because especially since it's a regional team, then we're not going to go after the other towns for the cost because it's already being funded. But we'll make sure that it's broken out properly.
I think the question becomes, let's say we spend $100,000 and make up numbers here.
Yeah, you are making numbers.
And we're reimbursed $120,000. Does that mean, well, make it 10,000 and 12,000.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't matter, it's a discussion. Does that mean then, out of that 12, we have to then give some of that money back to the other townships?
No, we'd have to give it back to the federal government.
No, the federal government's giving it to us.
And if you are not expending their funds, the way you would say in the grant, you're expending the funds, you would reimburse the federal government those funds.
Okay. So it's a dollar for dollar reimbursement.
You get
You do get
reimbursed.
reimbursed, but you get reimbursed for man hours also.
You get like, based on, like, for the storm we had back in March, we're applying for that right now. We get roughly $18.04 per man hour for the volunteer labor. And even the costs that, we incurred as a township for snow plowing and contractors, we get 80 cents back on the dollar.
Right, but I'm saying, you're saying expended, your volunteer hours are volunteering, and we're getting paid for those.
Yep.
So that's what I'm saying, that's kind
Those
of
funds, those funds can go back
And that
to
helps.
the volunteer agency too.
Well, they would go back to Shamong, they would go back to Shamong. We got, to reimburse.
Well, we're not getting reimbursed for Shamon, we can apply for Shamon. But if there were extra funds and we had to reimburse the other towns, we would.
Right, that was.
Yeah,
In
yes,
fact,
absolutely.
Medford used our people for a comfort station, and Medford submitted to the federal government for the hours that the Pineland CERT contributed in Medford, because that's where they were serving. So Medford, as a member of the CERT, has requested reimbursement for the CERT people from Pinelands, including people from Tabernacle, that helped them during the disaster. We have to look at all this as well.
Okay. Good. Any questions from the committee?
I'm okay with you doing that. It makes sense to me.
Thanks, Art.
And thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, Mr. Guzzi.
I think we've covered all my items.
Thank you, Dan. I think you answered everyone's question. Mr. Kramer.
First thing I have is the Cub Scouts have come to us with one of their activities they'd like to do in October is the Scouts are building scarecrows and asking them to go in front of, asking local businesses to put them in front of their facilities, and they've asked us if we would allow one to be put in front of Town Hall.
And what was it they're putting in?
Scarecrows.
Oh, scarecrow.
That's one item. If you're all right with that, just,
Fine with me.
okay.
I'm scared of scarecrows.
Just to bring you up to speed, the Community Development Block Grant that we applied for, we have received for $70,000 for an update in the wheelchair lift for Town Hall and repairs to the ramp out front. So Dan and I will be moving forward on that. Probably it'll be a late spring project next year. Time to get all the paperwork.
What's the scope of that? Do you have to demolish the existing one and build a new one, or?
The ramp?
Yeah.
We applied for repair and replacement of a portion of it. We'll have to look at where we are when we get to that point.
Okay.
So we've also looked at replacing the gazebo. It's been with us for around 20 years. Structure needs a fair amount of repair, and we were looking to update it so it was handicapped accessible. We're looking at a steel structure and working with a company out of Monmouth County. They will be here tomorrow to go over some proposals on that and put together a dollar amount for what they'd like to do with that.
You're looking to put it in the same place?
Relatively in the same place, maybe a little larger or whatever. They're sending their design person down.
So when you talk handicap, if I remember, that has a curb around it, doesn't it?
Yes.
So you gotta put
We're
a
in the
handicap
process.
ramp up into it? Okay.
We're in the process of doing that as part of the bench dedication.
Okay. You wanna talk about the bench dedication, or should we keep it quiet until we're ready?
Too late now.
That's up to you, Mary.
Okay. Yeah, you can mention it.
We have a bench dedicated to Dr. Stahl, who's provided us 28 years? 25 years of service, free service to the community for our rabies clinics. He's been a participating vet for all those years. And he's retiring from us. And we've purchased a bench for the dedication for it.
And you were going to locate the bench near the gazebo, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so what we were thinking for the committee was so that, Doug and I have talked about this for a while, that, we would do a proclamation, do the bench, and since the gazebo needed to be replaced, Doug thought the appropriate place to put the bench would be near the new gazebo. Now, whether the timing of the new gazebo meets the timing that we can do the dedication with Dr. Stallworth, we've got to work that all out.
Just one question, is there going to be a cat statue next door? So help bring the annual program into our town.
Cats are me.
Yeah. We did have a couple cats engraved in.
Well, he did, that was a very valuable program that came into our community.
The Feral Cat program was very successful.
It was a very successful program, it still is.
It's a tremendous record of volunteerism for the job.
Yeah, it is. Very well.
That's all I have.
Okay. Do you want to talk about, or maybe you and Peter and Dan about Irish Causeway, where we are with?
I was ready to speak to that in my report.
Okay, good, okay.
I now have the engineering information to complete that ordinance, and we will have that on for first reading at the next meeting. It was necessary for Dan to sort out some anomalies associated with the property lines and the right-of-way and the expected public dedication of the roadway. And so I have that information, and we'll have that on for first reading at the next meeting.
Are we, is it already our roadway, or are we looking, where do we stand? Are we?
Some portions are to the right-of-way, some were not. So this will put all of those issues to bed, and for once and for all, it will be a publicly dedicated roadway from the beginning to the end where it's designated. So I know that Dan had some problems with the deeds and needed to sort that out in order to make sense out of his survey information and legal description for the public dedication.
Okay.
That'll definitely be on for next meeting, and I have other items if you'd like me to go right into my report.
Doug, are you done?
Yes.
Kramer.
The other item that I wanted to mention was that Doug and I are going to talk about alternatives for the remaining municipally owned lands that were not bid upon. I don't know what our other options might be, but I thought I'd follow up with Doug. I haven't mentioned him anything yet, but I thought I'd follow up with him to before we put that file down, to determine whether there's any other potential ways of divesting the township of those publicly owned lands to the extent that they aren't of any value to the township, or what other options might be. So Doug and I will have a discussion on those issues. In addition, the demolition with respect to Moore Road, the court has authorized that. Doug has indicated when he does know that he has funding for it, that he'll advise me, and we will then be able to put that on an agenda so that we can go forward with that demolition in concert with the Sheriff's Department. Doug's just determining when that would be appropriate given the availability of funds. Is that correct?
That's correct. We do have one quote in, and we're waiting for a second.
And then, Mayor, my other matters are for executive session. Thank you.
Okay. Committee, Mr. Yates.
Nothing to report.
Committeeman Franzen.
Pass.
Committeewoman.
Nothing.
No. Deputy Mayor.
I met with the liaison committee this evening. At 6 o'clock, we had a good hour and a half discussion on several things. Superintendent Robbins specifically asked me to invite the committee to the Rewire event, which is being held at the school October 5th and 6th. It's a professional educational development event that is expected to be very well attended, and it's going to be held at OMS. When I say well attended, I mean some very high profile educators throughout the U.S. Are going to be in attendance. And Superintendent Robbins wanted to invite us specifically to come to stop and say hello and welcome the group to the community for coming. So it's a very, very good event. I think I briefly looked at the website, and he sent it to me this evening. He asked me to invite the committee.
Can we get LaShawn to send that out to us?
I can, or I can send it to you.
Okay.
Either one, yeah. I think you're going anywhere, aren't you?
Oh, yeah, Tracy.
And we had a good discussion with the liaison committee. We talked a lot about a lot of different topics, and more to come with that. That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. The only thing I had to report is South Jersey Gas was in town last week. They had a meeting at our firehouse. They're expanding their gas service to the east side of town, and we had a packed room, so it looks like we have a lot of residents that were very interested in hearing about the expansion of their gas service. If you're going to have a new road, you'll see they're putting a main down New Road. They're also putting a main down Patty Bunker Road to go back into Fox Chase and out into your neighborhood, Rick, and all the way out into Howard Park. So it looks like everyone on this side of 206 in Tabernacle Township, other than those way out in Speedwell, and further down on Carranza, will have the opportunity to have gas service for their homes. Well, that's all I have. And this time we're going to open up the public comment. Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Stuart Brooks, Moore's Meadow Road. I want to follow up on a comment that you made, Mr. Mayor, in June, to the extent that the committee is looking into bringing illegal buildings into compliance with the Inspector General's recommendation. This continues to be an issue because, with all due respect, the buildings just don't reflect the work that's being done. Resolution 2018-40 and the discussions we had back and forth on the legal agreement are two examples. Obviously, work was done on these, but it's just not reflected in detail in the billings. Now, unless the committee is receiving a separate detailed report on what those billings are, it's hard to see how you can know what they're paying for work. And no for requests with the township clerk, she's denied that there are any other such reports. And today's legal bill of September is another example. This bill was 90 days after the prior bill. So unless your memory is extraordinarily good, I don't think you're going to be remembering what was billed for 3 months ago. Yet it was approved. In short, the Inspector General made recommendations that each matter be identified by name. For example, maybe Resolution 2018-30, 40, 50, whatever, that the specific work be identified and that the bills be submitted monthly, and a few other requirements. So I'd like to know what the status of the committee's review is, if you plan on implementing that in the RFPs that are going to be upcoming for the next year. And if you'll be implementing it for engineering services as well, because the principles, which are good government principles, apply really to every invoice. The second comment I make concerns the way you're handling ordinances. And the public function ordinance was the one I was prepared to comment on, because that was one where there was a lot of good public comment, and yet it only came out at second reading. Because the general practice of the committee is not to take comment or make comment at first reading. And though I was prepared to mention that in relation to the public function ordinance, I was surprised to see that was the same practice that you followed for the bond ordinance and the other ordinance on the agenda tonight. In fact, the first one, Mayor Lee even said, I presume we're going to discuss this at second reading, implying we're not going to discuss it at first reading, and it wasn't discussed at first reading. By not discussing things at first reading, you jam everything into the second reading, and you often find yourself up against a time limit or changes that cause everything to be rewritten. And I just don't understand why you choose to make that your practice. And this loops back into a comment, I think it loops back into a comment that Mr. Lee made, and I'm not poking at Mr. Lee here, but it was, the comment was essentially, I didn't know why I get here, I'm just not prepared, or I don't have the work in front of me or the information in front of me to act on the public's business. And this also had to do with the ordinance. I think it was a bond ordinance. There was a lot of questions that he needed detail on. As a citizen sitting out here every meeting, I just don't understand why that information doesn't get from this end of the table, the staff's end of the table, to your end of the table, so that you have the information that you need to deal with to do the public's business at first reading and all the way along. Otherwise, first reading becomes pure administrivia, just a waste of everyone's time, except that it checks the box that it was introduced at first reading. And you end up sending Mr. Lang back 2 or 3 times to get a better ordinance, one that reflects what you want to see in that ordinance. And it seems to me that the process could be improved for everybody's benefit, and I would commend you to do it. Thank you.
Peter, do you want to respond to the River Building?
Mr. Brooks, I will indicate that I did speak with the mayor, and I have taken that criticism to heart. We've looked at those Attorney General recommendations. We looked at the history of the billing, and so we are instituting some practices to be more elaborate more with respect to the billing. And I think that you'll note that the billings that have been submitted since that time will reflect that, and we'd be happy to hear from you in the future on that issue.
Thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
Jim Jones, 16 Wimbledon Way. Something I wanted to express. You have item 12, which is an executive session, talking about TRS. I've heard a rumor that there may be an attempt to charge the squad rent for the use of that building. I think that would be something that would be absolutely wrong, if not ethically wrong. Steve, I'm going to come back to you. Remember the chicken ordinance that went and cost so much of a brouhaha?
How could I? Yeah.
Well, there have been 12 permits issued for the town. That's it. CDC still continues to report breakouts, over 200 people in the first 6 months of the year, 30 hospitalized, 10 of which were children, 1 of which was of death, in 44 states. So if there's all these people that wanted the chicken ordinance, where the hell are they?
You know, somebody told me, somebody had said to me, I ran into somebody that wanted the chicken ordinance, and it was helpful. And, I mean, there were one of the people that came to me when I was mayor and said, "Can we do something?" And I said, "How are your chickens?" "Oh, they all died." I said, so that means no more chickens? No, we're not doing chickens anymore. Okay.
Okay, it was just a point of reference.
Thanks.
The ordinance regarding public gatherings made a comment about exceeding the allowed number of people within it. I'm not sure, and I'm completely ignorant in this, but how can you exceed the fire marshal's stated occupancy limits on the building? And how can you establish them for things such as the fire company's engine room, the squad's engine room, or somebody else like that? Because I'm pretty sure that those are not posted by the fire marshal. I don't know that for sure, but I'm pretty sure. Something to consider, that you do not have the control you think you have.
Mr. Jones, can you repeat that? Can you say that once more?
Sure.
Can you follow that?
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
You wanted a permit so that the emergency services would know when you had large gatherings, is the way I've taken it. And the words that were used were if you were going to exceed the posted limitations regarding occupancy. I don't know how you do that, how you approve exceeding the fire marshal's occupancy limits, and I don't know how you establish them for areas such as the fire department's engine room, if you had the senior dinner down there, remember, more than X number of seniors, because there are a bunch of old guys in town.
Okay.
So something to be aware of, I think, when you're looking at this thing, to see.
The concept isn't that they would be permitted to exceed it, they would not.
Okay.
Because they're not allowed to trump the fire code in that regard. The concept is, if the event is going to draw enough people to the site, irrespective of occupancy of the building.
Okay, well,
but using that figure as a litmus test for whether or not you have to file the application.
Okay, that's
so
not what I heard, but I'm glad to hear that.
Good
because
observation.
I didn't know how you would do it either.
And that was the whole point.
Yeah.
Because you're not gonna exceed what the fire code is. So-
Yeah, and I didn't hear an answer when I asked about the septic system on 206, whether or not that was going to allow additional commercial activity or something like that. And I think the real answer to that is the septic system being enlarged or not.
Septic system is being, septic system is being designed for the current capacity. They can't expand the commercial building that's there without coming in front of the land use board to do so.
Okay,
So that's being designed to service the existing commercial development on that site.
Okay, so there's an issue with the septic system and its functionality right now?
I can't tell you, I'm assuming that's why they're replacing it, because there is an issue with it now.
That would be a health department thing, I think. Whether or not that's right.
Quite honestly, I'm just happy that they're coming before us.
Yeah, well, yeah, because I know of a couple of places,
I know,
I think,
but
where septic systems were reworked and you got guys that were moving a swimming pool.
Oh, we have a
That
place that has
doesn't sound right.
been replaced and we're still working on it down the street, so some needs it just being removed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome, Jim. Anyone else from the public? Mrs. Brooks?
Brooks, Morris Meadow Road. There is the bike path that Mr. Guzzi submitted a DOT grant for $243,000. What portion of that is Tabernacle's contribution, Mr. Guzzi?
When we do when we make a grant application, we apply for the entire project.
Okay.
And the DOT decides if they do issue a grant, the amount of money that the grant will be issued for, and then typically we do as much of the project as the grant money will allow, unless the governing body wants to spend more, to finish the project if it's close.
Okay, that helps a lot, thank you. Recently, the deputy mayor made a statement in the Pine Barrens Tribune, I think it was a September issue, that was discussing the road, Carranza Road issue. And I'm just quoting, by Mr. Lee, Carranza has needed work for about 5 or 6 years, but not decades. Now, seriously, Mr. Lee, I really think you need to get your facts straight, honestly. Everyone knows and has commented about the quality of that road. And there's even a description, and even Mr. Yates said it was an embarrassment when the road was being discussed in relation to the Carranza Memorial event. But even your road report that was adopted by the committee in 2017 describes that the road was never finished, never had a top coat, and was never completed. And so to put out that it's that the road has been taken care of for many of these years, it's just untrue. And the road has not. Potholes have been filled, yes, but they just keep, every year they need to be repaired. And so it's really time to take care of that road, and it concerns me when I see grants going in for Oakshade Road, which Mr. Brooks brought up, that there's no consideration, it's almost limited consideration being given to Carranza Road, and that really makes me wonder if it is ever going to get done. The other thing I'd like to say with regard to the invoice, actually I'd like to make a comment, additional comment about Mr. Brooks's comment about ordinances of first reading. I think the process that he's outlined is clear and quite true. I do disagree with my husband at times, but this is really true. And it's costly to us because because you're not having any discussions before first reading, I don't know what's going on in the 4 weeks between meetings, because you're down to 6 months of the year having one meeting a month. And so I don't know how you're carrying on discussions or how you're carrying on business, but the fact remains that you bring these things to first reading, you have no discussion, and then what happens is you ask for a complete rewrite. Mr. Lang's bill is just running up, so that's our bill that's running up, And you also, what you do is you put out notices. You notice the first reading, you pass it at first reading, you notice it, and it costs us notice money. For example, the public function was $50. Now maybe that's a little money for you, but I find it when it's constantly going on. You know, it's time to reevaluate your process for handling ordinances at first reading. You don't have to often go to notice, especially because you can take comments, have a decent discussion, like you really did the last time on that second reading on the public function ordinance, and realize that it really wasn't suitable and you needed to revisit it. But in the meantime, that's probably a $500 bill for us. So I would really ask that you take care of it. And as far as invoices go, I would hope that all professionals would abide by the comptroller. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else with the public comments? Okay, we're going to close the public comment session, and we're going to go to the executive session to discuss matters relating to contract with the PRS.
All contract terms and conditions related to the provision of emergency medical rescue responder services between Tabernacle Township and the Tabernacle Rescue Squad.
Okay, we may or may not take action after executive session. Okay, the public portion is adjourned, and you're welcome to come back.
So moved.
I'm sorry?
Second.
Motion going into executive session.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you.
That's what I meant. You got him? Got the front? Okay. Aubrey and I's got the back. We're watching you two. Aubrey and I are.
You're really getting down there fast.
That's the bad teeth run around. Wait, see how busy. What? I think there's one in there.
Because I wonder where it's indirect, I thought it was direct.
You were